Hello, everyone, and welcome to our DWIB and DCA Women in Consulting event. We're so excited to be collaborating on this event. My name is Evelyn. I'm the president of DeGroot Women in Business.
Yeah, and I'm Jasper. I'm the president of the DeGroot Consulting Association. Evelyn approached me probably way back at the beginning of the school year with the idea for this event. And right away, I was on board. I thought it was an amazing idea. Consulting is typically underrepresented at McMaster, let alone DeGroot. And it's also traditionally a male-dominated role. So, we really were striving to, get a panel of people who could come out to this event and share their experiences with you. Just so you have, people to look up to, you learn a little bit more about what the career is actually like, and you get a chance to network with some people in the industry.
So we hope that by tonight's event, you feel enlightened about the world of consulting, and maybe even our wonderful lineup of panelists even ignites a passion for consulting in you. So to begin today, we'll start off with hearing the stories and journeys of our three panelists, and then we'll move into a Q&A portion and open up the floor to our audience to ask any questions you may have, and then we'll conclude with some networking. So with that, I will now pass it on to Laura and Iman to introduce themselves and kick off the panel for us.
Hi, everybody. We're super excited. My name is Laura. I'm the Director of Marketing for DeGroot Women in Business, and I'm really looking forward to tonight's event. I'm going to pass it over to Iman to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Iman, and I'm a first-year associate of the DeGroot Consulting Association, and I'm really excited to be here with you all today.
So without further ado, we are going to move into our panel section of tonight's event. We're going to kick off by introducing our amazing speakers that we have here with us tonight. And just to start with a quick introduction, learning a little bit about their role and their previous experience. I know that Hopin is a new platform, so we're going to wait a little bit just to get all of our speakers comfortable with getting on the platform, but we're going to start with that tonight. I see Ali is here, so hi Ali. How are you doing?
Hi everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
That's the first test. Okay.
Yeah, we had your video on, but it turned off for just a moment there.
Okay. Well, let me know if it cuts in and out.
Hi, Preet.
Hi. How are you all?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks.
Oh, we got your video back, Ali.
Oh, good. It hasn't gone away for me, so you'll have to tell me if it gives you any issues.
No problem. The virtual world, we gotta pass it off. One second. Okay, perfect. We are still waiting for Margaret, so while she's getting set up there, if you don't mind, just starting off with those introductions, I'm going to pass it off to Preet, if that's okay. Just do a little introduction for yourself for our teams today.
Sure, absolutely. Perfect. So hi, everyone. My name's Preet. Hope you guys can hear me okay, yeah? All right, perfect. So I am a manager of professional services at a software company called Profix Software. Some of you may already be familiar with that company. We have worked very closely over the last several years with McMaster and DeGroot specifically, as we do offer our 16-month internship program. And every year we hire 5 or 6 different interns from that program just to basically come work with us in a consulting type of position at Profix. So just to give you guys a bit of a background about myself, so I am a McMaster graduate as well. I was actually enrolled in the 16-month internship program. And during my undergrad, just to give you guys a bit of an idea, so I was pursuing a business commerce degree and wasn't ever really sure exactly what I wanted to do, right? So, I was taking mostly accounting courses because that was just what my friends were doing, there's only a few key things, I think, when you're an undergrad that you focus more towards, like the accounting, the marketing, HR, and those sorts of things. So not much Hi, Margaret.
Hi. Okay. Sorry. I'm trying to figure out how to get on here. All right. Forgive me. Go ahead, Preet.
No, you're good. No worries. I basically was taking a variety of different courses, spent a lot of time just in my first year, second year, third year, wondering like, what is it that I want to do? Like, I don't want to, tie myself to something that I have to spend my next, 3-4 years of my life just wasting and that sort of thing. So super confusing time for sure. So if a lot of you guys feel like that, you're not alone. So through the 16-month internship, went to the networking event. And if any of you guys are involved in that, I know typically what we're told is to really just try to get any opportunity, speak to as many people as you can, and just secure something that you're really interested in, right? So I went to career night, spoke to a couple different companies, all sorts. Just had a good connection with my colleagues now that were there for Profix software, and ended up essentially securing an internship with them. So knew absolutely nothing about software, knew absolutely nothing about consulting, and just kind of decided to take that internship because it was something unknown, right? So I at least had hoped, since I'm not sure exactly if I want to do accounting or something else, like maybe in this role, it'll at least help me learn, what I like, what I dislike, to help me navigate maybe what I want to do in the future, sort of thing. So, so that's how I ended up essentially just starting off my career at Profix. 16-month internship, probably the most difficult time of my life. You were treated pretty much like a full-time employee at Profix. And there was lots of challenging situations that kind of came your way, right? So, one, the technical aspect of learning the software. Two, there was lots of travel involved. So I was super introverted in my earlier years, right? So being a student, super intimidating, obviously, traveling, having to speak to, higher level executives of various companies. So lots and lots of challenging experiences, right, throughout that internship. But by the end of it, I was not the same person, right? Did it help me learn kind of what my likes were, what my dislikes were? Absolutely, right? So, and after that, ended up returning back to school and decided to just return back full-time with Profix after graduation, just because of probably the challenges that I had faced and how much I had grown through, learning from those challenges and those experiences. And so been there ever since and just kind of decided to, work hard, move my way up into my current role, which is a manager within the professional services department. And so now my job essentially is just to really, guide, manage a team of consultants, as well as a portfolio of projects, and really just make sure that the team is well supported and clients are successful. So I don't know how much time I took up there. Hopefully it wasn't too much and too boring. But yeah, that's kind of just a high level, summary of my experience in undergrad, as well as kind of how I came to work at Profix and where I'm at now.
It's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. Definitely not boring at all. I know that learning about your background, everything is definitely what brought everyone to come out to the event today. So thank you so much, Preet. I'm going to pass it off to Margaret, just do an introduction on yourself as well.
Sure. So my name is Margaret Zanel. I am a very proud McMaster business alumni. Before it was DeGroote, I got my honors BCom and then also my MBA. I remain a friend and a member of the McMaster Alumni Board, and I think this is like the second or third time I've had an opportunity to engage with the DeGroote Women in Business, and it's delightful to know that we also have partnership with the Consulting Association. I think that's fantastic that, Evelyn, you and Jasper sort of connected to bring this this career path some amplification, because it is one that's quite interesting, I would say. So I will give one tiny bit of context, and then I'll talk about myself. So, consulting and professional services is quite an expansive, set of career opportunities. And the way Preet described it, she's in an organization, I believe, if I'm right, Preet, where you're involved with technology and consulting services that are associated with the deployment of a solution.
Correct.
And and then Ali, I think, is on the Accenture front, and I'm not gonna. I know she's going to talk about that, but there's business and management consulting, and then there's often there's this notion of technical and technology consulting, and there's other types of consulting, but it is quite expansive. And in my career, I never intended to go into consulting. So my path was out of university into a technology company. So the equivalent of what would have been, going into a Google and a Facebook back in the early 90s, I went into Xerox. You had either Xerox or IBM. And, these were technology solutions, and, you went right into oftentimes the marketing side of the business. I will frame myself today as, a consultant and entrepreneur. But I started my career, as a marketing analyst coming out of university. And my career's been, like floating down a river raft. It's sort of, I knew I wanted to go forward, but I bounced off various different rocks and paths with all the intent of, pursuing the one spot that, the one, I guess, discipline that I love is strategy. And, it is the underpinning oftentimes of the work that you do in consulting, because you're ultimately putting together a current state, a future state, and establishing a path. And that path, opens up the opportunities of what you're, the problems that you're solving. My journey has been in corporate to start my career. Then I, left after a decade in the mid 90s and went to California and worked in the startup world. So if you guys have ever watched Social Network, that was kind of my, it's a good oldie. It's an oldie but a goodie. But lived the California startup world and also startups in Canada. And then I came back into corporate. And then most recently, the last couple of years, went into consulting. In my corporate career, I was in the last sort of 10 years of my corporate career, I was vice president of strategy, business transformation, and IT and marketing. And so like Preet, our consulting services in that context was largely around two disciplines. One was, technology deployment, but the other was supporting the business in its aspirations of growth and expansion. And so I got the opportunity to be a consultant within a corporation. And then when I left, I decided to pivot and start my own consultancy in strategy and marketing called Zanel Advisory. And that's morphed largely into advisory and executive coaching. But then I opened a second consulting firm with some buddies of mine from McMaster called Wentworth Strategy. And we are a diversified management consultancy for small to medium business, basically bringing the capabilities of like an Accenture and a Deloitte to small, medium business where they otherwise wouldn't have that, those advisory services in the areas of marketing and strategy and financial operations and ancillary services around legal and accounting. I didn't come out of school to be a consultant. And, it's like when you come out of school and you want to be an accountant, you have the hard knocks of being in an accounting firm, and you do the 70, 80 hours and you kill yourself and you work your way up, and, same with law. Well, I'm sure Ali's going to talk about what it's like to be in a consulting firm. It's very demanding, and it is a different experience when you come out of university and go into consulting than if you aspire to do it later in life. So what I didn't benefit from that maybe Ali will talk about is all the frameworks and the things that you learn as a result of being in a professional services firm. You get that through the School of Hard Knocks when you're doing it, when you're building your expertise. But you come with a certain dimension of knowledge that people pay for when you get older. So today, you know, I do strategy work, which I love, and executive advisory and coaching. I work with, over my career, you know, over 15 CEOs and their leadership teams. I'm particularly a passionate advocate of women's advancement to the C-suite and the boardroom. I work as well, so I do a lot of fractional. So that's the one thing about being a consultant later in your life. You don't necessarily have a full-time job. You have a whole bunch of, you know, client-based relationships that are fractional. So I'm also the executive director for the mentorship programs for Women Get On Board. So I'm very much entrenched in the community of supporting women advance to the boardroom table as well as the executive table. I love consulting. I have to say, it is for the curious mind. It's very invigorating. It's stressful as all get out, but it's inspiring to help people. You're constantly learning. Like I'm 30 years in business, and, you know, only in the last 2 years have I, you know, gone into bona fide consulting. And I will say that it has been the most extraordinary learning at my age, like you know, you could be my kids, like at my age, to learn how, you know, all these new learnings in these last couple of years. And they're largely because of the changing environment, you know, you start to really see the effects of what has happened with COVID on business. So it's an endless opportunity for the curious mind to really grow. And I'm just delighted to be here. So hopefully that was a good intro.
Yes, amazing intro. Thank you so much. Thanks to have you back, Margaret. And finally, but obviously not least, we're really excited to welcome Ali as well. And I'll pass the floor to you.
Thanks, Laura. Can everybody see my video? Like, is it working now okay?
We just lost you.
We did have you though. I'm sure it'll come back.
Oh, all right. Well, sorry about that, but I'll continue to talk. So hi, everybody. I'm Ali Atkinson. I'm ish degree grad. I actually at McMaster in social sciences, so I didn't really know at all what I wanted to do. But shortly into my career at McMaster, I decided that business was just the path for me where I wanted to be. So I made the decision to switch into the program. So that took me pretty well into my second year. I did summer school, and then I spent the rest of my time at McMaster focusing on kind of the sales area as well as finance. So I knew that kind of areas of interest for me, but didn't really have an idea after school at all. And I started to learn more about the professional services firms just through my research outside of school. Involved in Canada's Next Top Ad Exec, so I knew what it was like to go. It was something be very based. Which learned. I don't know if any of you have had the relationship with Professor Malik, but we were encouraged to run Canada's Next Top Ad Exec just like a business would be run. So we were doing everything from the bottom up and vice versa. And that pretty much showed me that what I liked and what I also was thriving was that face-to-face and in relationship with people. So whether that was a professor at a university or whether I was almost selling the competition, it was something that I found was a passion of mine. And so I started thinking of ways that naturally that would be a really good fit for sales. But the more that I had my summer internships in marketing and finance, I kind of wanted to learn a little bit more about consulting because it seemed to take a lot of, like Margaret said, the frameworks that you learn in school, that you learn when you're in industry. But I wanted to take things like that you would learn in finance, for example, and use it in a practice that you would have that face-to-face client relationship similar to sales. So I started to do some research on my own about what consulting would be. I ended up getting connected with a recruiter at Accenture during my 4th year of university. And so I just started learning a lot more professional services. I just by fluke happened to cross some of the bigger ones, so I started to focus there and learned a lot about the culture at Accenture through my time getting recruited and going through the motions of pursuing the application. I fell in love with the culture, which naturally had me transition to really wanting to get into the company. So I went through all of the different rounds of the interviews, studies, and then naturally we found it was a good fit. So when I came into Accenture, which was almost 2 years ago now, which flies by, I'm sure Preet and Margaret will at that because it's only been 2 years, but I feel like I just came in. So it's easy, but I am really enjoying it. And I think to expectation of consulting, I would say you can never really understand what it is until the aspect of having that relationship-based career for me is absolutely been checked off. That box is just exactly what I had hoped for in consulting, and I find that the client-facing aspect of it is a lot of fun. So it seems the perfect crossover for between having the inquisitive problem solving in your career as well as having those relationships that you would have probably in a sales career as well. So I've been really enjoying that, and I'm not sure if anybody knows about Accenture and how their analyst program works, but essentially when I came in, I was not aligned to anything. I didn't have a project for me. I had to come in and essentially network for another job within the company. So since we're projects, you have to get staffed on a project. So you come in, your days are not occupied. There's nothing on the calendar unless you book meetings. So I was going in, and from 8 till 5 every day, I was just in back-to-back coffee chats, meeting people at the firm, and that relationship that you form, and sometimes you'd hit it off, sometimes you wouldn't, sometimes it would be something that you're interested in doing, and other times it wouldn't be. But I ended up finding that I was really passionate about the financial services area. So since I joined 2 years ago, I've been working in that space. And like Preet and had said, that you can really work in any area, and I think technology is naturally the center of a lot of professional services work nowadays. And so what I've been finding is really interesting is that crossover between technology and financial services. And so that's where I've been spending a lot of my time personally, and that's pretty much what I've been doing the past couple of years. I had the experience, I don't know if anybody from the last consulting event, but I've had a little bit of exposure to the Consulting Association, so I'm excited to meet a lot of the women in business folks as well tonight. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you, Ali. And a lot of our members from the DCA and DWIB are excited to meet you as well. So thank you, all three of you, for your amazing introductions. We're going to move into our question period. So we have a list of questions that were submitted by members in both associations. And if anyone watching tonight has a question for any of our speakers, feel free to put that in the chat, and we will get to those later on. But just to start, we're not going to go in any particular order, so feel free to jump in at any time or hop in at any time. But we're going to start with just understanding what a typical day in each of your roles looks like in each of your different backgrounds.
All right, so I guess I can start. So maybe I'll walk you guys through, since I've done the consultant position and now I'm more in a managerial role, maybe I'll walk you guys through what a typical day in my role looked like when I was doing consulting, because I think that'll be a little bit more relevant here. So yeah, as Margaret and Ali were mentioning, right? So so essentially Profix is a technology, right? So we have a software that we sell to our customers. And what the software really does is helps clients to automate the way that they do their budgeting, their financial reporting, as well as their forecasting. So traditionally, right, where a lot of companies may just have been using Excel to do a lot of those things, we try to bring all of that into our software, which is actually called Profix as well, and automate a lot of those processes, right? So like by a click of a button, they can basically produce all their financial reports that they need to versus having to, you know, deal with Excel freezing and lags and formulas breaking and those sorts of things. And so a typical day, you know, while I was consulting is you essentially get assigned a client. And so, you know, you maybe are working with just one client on a full-time basis, or you may be working with multiple clients kind of part-time. And so the way that an overall project is kind of laid out. So let's say, you know, the average project is 6 weeks, you know, in length. The first week or so of the project, right? Really what you're just doing is, you know, having conversations with the customer to really understand their business, right? And so you'd, you know, figure out, you know, why did they purchase Profix? What are the pain points that they have with the current way that they're doing their financial reporting or budgeting or forecasting, right? So we take a look at all their requirements, their reports, you know, what they want to be able to have Profix automate for them. And then starting after that comes, you essentially would create a formal kind of business requirements document, which basically just outlines, right, what we're going to be delivering to them, as well as a detailed project plan. Oh, there's a bit of an echo. I think it's coming from Ali because I see her mic turn green.
Let me mute.
Perfect. Yes, awesome. All right, that's good. Thanks, Ali. So where was I? So yeah, so essentially you're working on a project, you understand the requirements, you create these formal documents, make sure the client is kind of, you know, good with what you're going to be delivering. And then, you know, once we get sign off and they agree with what the scope of the work is going to be, that's really when you start actually working with the client, right? So that's where a lot of the, you know, client-facing interaction comes in. You know, previously when it wasn't COVID, we have an opportunity to actually go and visit clients, right? Which is a lot of fun. It's nice because you get to, you know, work with a variety of different customers and a variety of different businesses. So it really helps you also understand how different businesses operate, right? From an automobile company to retail to non-for-profit, you name it, right? And so the majority of the consulting time is really just spent you know, meeting with the client regularly to get them trained on the software, working with them to actually build out their solution in the software, right? So it's very interactive, where, you know, you're trying to understand their requirements, design, translate their requirements to building their components in the actual software, and then also, you know, just training them as well. So that's really the majority of kind of where the timeline of what a typical project would look like at Profix while you're consulting. And then towards the tail end, the last 1 or 2 weeks, you know, once we feel that everything, you know, in the software has been built out, that's really when you're working to make sure the client feels comfortable now using Profix for their reporting cycles and their budgeting and their forecasting, right? Because the goal is, you know, they no longer have to do things the way they were doing it previously using Excel, and they can now use Profix to basically replace their reporting and budgeting and forecasting and all of that, right? So a lot of time is spent towards the tail end, 1 or 2 weeks, just, you know, working with them, doing test run-throughs, making sure the reports are producing the numbers that they want, and really just getting them to a point where they feel comfortable, right? And so it involves sometimes getting super creative because, you know, a lot of people may not be as super tech savvy. You know, they're used to doing things in Excel, same old for their entire lives. And now they have this whole new software they need to replace. So you have to get creative sometimes, right? Maybe create some sample cheat sheets, documentation for them, really just to get them to that, level of comfort so they're able to kind of let your hand go and be successful with the solution. So a very, very diverse role, definitely, very exciting, right? There's lots of different hats that you have to wear. You have to be kind of, they're expert in when it comes to the actual technical components. You're training, you're doing documentation, there's travel involved, right? You're meeting clients. So lots and lots of different kind of skills that you're tapping into for sure. And from one project to the next, every business operates a little bit differently. So constant learning for sure. I think as Margaret was mentioning, it's you never get bored because there's always something exciting and things are evolving. So I would say within a consultant, that pretty much wraps up at Profix, at least, how a typical role would look like.
Great. Shall I go? Okay. So typical day. So I'm going to give you a typical day of the life in Margaret, and then I'll talk about consulting. So workout, meditate, children's breakfast, work, dinner, walk, work. And we got a COVID puppy, so we've added that to the family. Preet, I think so. I'm gonna give you a couple of context things as it relates to consulting. So you can consult, like we said, technology or management consulting. And so technology is like, as Preet said. Oh, there, Ali's on again. I'm gonna have to maybe mute Ali. Okay. And, it's needs analysis, understanding where they want to go. It's consulting and recommendations around how they're going to do it. And then effectively it's the deployment of it. It's sort of those stages. That is, largely the cycle, whether you're doing technology consulting or you're doing business consulting. You understand, you go through a process of needs, assessment, research, analysis, recommendations. And then in some cases, particularly where consulting's coupled with a technology solution, a team or the team that began this also is a part of the implementation and deployment. And in some cases, as Preet discussed, you are then transferring the ownership to the client so that they manage it moving ahead. So that's one kind of consulting. Then there's this other kind of consulting, which is I go in, you're a company that is, has their business in Canada and they want to move and take advantage of taking their business into the US. And so, that's a different kind of consulting. What is their, what's the market opportunity? What's their value proposition? Do they have unique and differentiated capabilities? How do we, what's the distribution channels that you could take it into the US? How do you establish that? What's the research around that? What are the recommendations? And then, how does it then get executed? Different concepts, different, business challenges, but similar concept. Second thing I wanted to bring up is, and I'll tell you my day in a minute, but the second piece is, as a consultant, you can be largely, it's done on a project. You're going in, you're doing a project, it's a defined time, there's a budget and resources. As you get older, as you evolve, depending on your type of consulting, you can also be retained. And you can be retained as a consultant, at fractionally, and be brought into an organization. And instead of working 5 days a week, you work 1 day a week, or you work 5 days an hour, and you're constantly supporting them, providing consulting services, but you're retained almost like a lawyer, that sort of thing. So that's just a different model, retain, project. And so we'll leave it at that. In my world, I have multiple clients. So I have tech clients where, we're in the process of exactly that. They have they're a transportation engineering professional services organization that has created a tech platform, and we're looking at, they do it in Canada, it's all around AI and smart cities. They're interested to expand in Europe. So we're looking at the regulatory frameworks in Europe, which are friendly cities that might benefit from this solution. And we're doing market analysis to determine what their next step is in a prioritized country for them to pursue business. So that's kind of one client. That was an hour today, on a project that we're working through. Another client is a conservation tech company. They're actually coming out of McMaster, and they're building a game-changing technology to identify species in field to help the illegal trafficking of animals, of animals that are threatened of extinction. And we're working with scientists and we're working with NGOs to develop this technology and take it to market. So, that's a different client I'm working with. Then there's another client that I'm working with, which is a probiotics company out of California. And they've developed probiotics, world-class probiotics for 35 years, but they've moved into CBD. So I do have, in my world, I've taken the knowledge that I learned in technology and I'm applying it. I also have a practice and do a lot of work in cannabis and CBD, because it's a very similar industry, high growth, nascent, very symptomatic, very similar to what my world was in the 90s in tech is what's happening in cannabis. So long story short, the day in the life of Margaret is, 1 hour client one is, we're working on CBD and probiotics. The next, we did an hour with, trying to find investor strategy for the tech conservation company. Also pitching. So you're always pitching too when you're in consulting. You're not only working on your current clients, you're looking for your new clients. Working with another company, with another opportunity with a not McMaster, but another university, and supporting them in their restructuring. So very different business challenges, but the same process: needs analysis, assessment, research, recommendations, deployment. And it's underpinned by, we have a business problem, we have an objective and a goal, and how do we get there? And that's, so it does require you to be like, it's like a game of Tetris, like you're constantly figuring stuff out, and it challenges even the best of us. So that's a day in my life. I'm exhausted by this time. Just so you know, I have wine in my coffee cup. Not that I should say that out loud. Hopefully you're not recording this, but
I think it's a great idea.
That's it for me. Yeah.
I think both what Preet and Margaret just said is a perfect segue, because I have a very different experience to date from my day-to-day. So I'll give you an example. I just rolled off a project that was 14 months long. And in that particular project, we were working for a bank that had to basically check the box for a regulator. And so in that instance, they brought us on pretty much as employees of the bank. And so I was working in their office every day. I had a laptop of theirs. My day-to-day was pretty much commuting from my house to theirs, my desk at their house. So in that sense, I was their employee, technically. I was doing the work that somebody there could have done, but everybody there already had their day-to-day jobs, and this was just another thing to add to their list. None of them wanted to do it, and so they needed help. So in that case, me and my team went in. We were also there to advise on past experiences. So my manager and my senior manager had a lot of experience in that particular area. So we were able to advise on best practices in industry, which was an interesting experience too, because despite the fact that we were there to check the box for this regulator, there were easier ways to do it than what they were doing. So in that sense, the traditional expectation of consulting is definitely coming into play. despite the fact that we were just doing work that they would have already been able to do themselves. So that was pretty much my day to day. Now I have a much different experience. I'm on the bench for a couple of weeks, which means that I'm not staffed on a project. So I'm between projects, and my day to day now looks very different. So I'm in that selling phase that Margaret spoke to. My day is full of working on RFPs. So we're responding to requests for proposals, and we're saying our pitch to sell Accenture as the professional services firm that can do the work that a company has come to us and said, we'd like you to bid on this. So in that sense, the style of work I'm doing right now doesn't really have a 9 to 5 limit, which is typically consulting. If somebody pings me tonight at 11 and they need me to do something, it's really quick turnarounds, and that's just the expectation. I have a lot of fun doing the work I'm doing right now. I think it's exciting, and it's interesting to see how you can tailor things to each client. But my next project also gives a different picture for you guys. I will be going on for a shorter stint. It's just 1.5 months, and it's a process optimization gig. So this isn't the same as my last project. Now they're bringing us in to do something where they would like our help in the traditional sense to just consult them and say, where can we do better? So that, I'm sure, will be a different experience. Again, I'm brought on as an employee of their company. So it's experience in the sense that I get to learn the systems that everybody uses. It can be frustrating as all get out. You'll see some very archaic technology at some firms, and you'll have to learn quick, but it's exciting. I would say my day-to-day varies, and I hope that came across by giving those 2 examples.
Great. So it's really interesting to see the variety and the differences between everyone's day and what you're doing every single day. Moving on to the next question. So as we learned in your introductions, all of you started consulting at different stages in your life. So why did you choose to enter when you did? And if you could go back, what would you do differently?
All right, so it's my turn. So in terms of why I chose to go into consulting, I think I alluded to this a little bit during my intro, but I was really just not sure what I wanted to do, right, in university. And so you don't learn too much about kind of what consulting is throughout, undergrad, or at least at that point I didn't, right? And so, you were picking your typicals, like, am I going into banking, accounting, finance, HR, that sort of thing. And so none of those really excited me. My biggest fear of kind of sticking to any one of those fields was just, am I going to get bored, right? Doing the same thing kind of over and over and over again, right? And so the reason why I got into consulting, obviously, was thanks to McMaster and the 16-month internship program. But the reason why I stayed was just because of the diversity that it offers and the challenges that it offers. You never stop learning, you never stop growing. The technology side that I'm in, the software is constantly evolving, right? So just recently in the last 3 or so years, our software basically, started being hosted on the cloud. And so there's a whole bunch of changes that come with that, right? And so, more recently, we're adding new modules to our software. So it's always exciting. You're kind of keeping up with, latest trends and kind of technology, software, and just the diversity, I think, of, businesses you get to work with, right? And so had I not been in consulting and I was just working maybe, in an accounting firm per se, I would know about my accounting firm and how it operates. But, in the last 4 or 5 years of my consulting career, I have such a stronger understanding of how different types of industries operate, right? When it comes to their, financial, accounting or budgeting and all of that sorts of things, right? So for me, I think it was the diversity, right? Never getting bored. it's project based, I think, as Margaret mentioned, right? So you're working on different types of projects, you're meeting different types of people, which is, you know, always exciting as well. So I think definitely that would be, you know, just how I got into consulting, why I decided to stay. In terms of if I would do anything differently, the only thing I would say, and maybe this is, you know, feedback for you guys just being in your undergrad still, is just maybe not spending as much time like thinking or worrying about the exact field that I want to get into and just going for it, right? Whatever interests you, whatever you think is going to give you the most amount of challenges, right, to help you just learn, right, about, you know, what your dislikes are, what your likes are in a career, because it's very hard, right, to know. And I'm sure a lot of you guys feel that way. I think, Ali, you mentioned you felt that same way during your undergrad, is, you know, what exactly do I want to do? So I just wish I had, you know, hadn't been spent so much time and so much energy, like evaluating pros and cons of accounting versus HR versus what I want to do, and just kind of going for, you know, an opportunity or a co-op opportunity to help my experience just, you know, help me figure out what it is, what type of job I want to end up doing in the future, per se.
Great. Okay, for me. So when I was your ages, consulting wasn't really discussed, and it wasn't a discipline. You know, I think about, like, it would have been 1989, 90, right? Like a long time ago. And EY, PwC, Deloitte wasn't Deloitte, and, you know, Anderson Consulting, you know, like everything was a different name back then. But it wasn't, you know, and to be honest, they weren't recruiting at Mac, you know, in the business area. Maybe they were, you know, present at some of the Toronto-based universities, or maybe even Western, but like, I don't even remember them coming to town to do any of the career fairs. And quite honestly, you know, the closest thing that I understood that I loved in my MBA was there was a policy course. I did international business as my MBA, and actually Japanese management was the minor. Market research, marketing, you know, was very interesting to me, because it was all about what are the customers' needs, where are they at today, and how do you get them to where you want them to be. That was the closest to what you would consider, you know, the kinds of needs analysis that we're discussing, that would be, you know, kind of a transitional to consulting. But anyways, it wasn't really an option. My exposure to consulting happened when it would have been after I was, you know, did my corporate, and then I did startups, and then I went back to corporate in the capacity of director of strategy just before I became vice president. And we brought in Deloitte to do work with us on our strategic planning. And I fell in love with that work. And I, you know, I watched, and well, I secured the relationship with Deloitte and became quite good friends with the individuals there. And I sucked it up like a sponge on how they were doing our annual planning, our strategic planning process. And that became, you know, like, it just ignited a passion, because I love strategy. But then watching how, you know, you methodically go through that with this framework and the process, and it actually turned into an amazing relationship I had with Deloitte. But shortly after, like a couple of years in, and I still remain close friends with them, we kind of kicked them out, and I built the strategy practice, and I built the strategy PMO in Xerox because I loved it so much. So that sort of started the passion for it. And then it became abundantly clear to me, I don't care what you call it, consulting or not, you were solving big problems. And whether it was technology based, and we deployed an ERP to new market expansion. It was ignited my passion for, the combination of complexity to showing results and impact. And so that began my interest in consulting, was just seeing it in practice and then being a part of the team. And then, owning that function, effectively owning the internal consultancy at, a Fortune 100, which then led me to, when the time I left, then I said, I want to do this myself. And I say that in one fell swoop of a statement. I can tell you that was months of determination of, am I going to go back into corporate once I left, my company, and take a similar role, or am I going to be an entrepreneur and figure out how to do this on my own or with a small firm? Your question of would you have done it earlier? It's interesting because I was walking with my husband and I was thinking about this question. Ali's described the experience of a young person in a large consultancy, one of the big four, very astutely. You are networking, you are figuring out where the big projects are, you are selling yourself, you're building relationships, you're developing client relationships, and you're hustling. And you're hustling to get that work, you're hustling to be to be respected, and you're building a reputation. And over time you move up the chain and you can become a partner, et cetera, et cetera. You hustle if you go into a corporation, you're hustling if you're Preet, there's no easy breaks, right? Like you come out of university, you pick your passion, you pick your poison, and you're hustling and you're figuring it out. Would I, at one point, and us girls and boys on the phone, about midway through my career, in my first tour of duty, when about halfway through before I went to startups, I was approached by a couple consulting firms, and I wanted to, at that point, 15 years ago, whatever, I wanted to go into a real consulting firm, like one of the big four. And they were quite discriminating that, I did not grow up in them. So, it's a different path. There's different paths. I'm going to go in the guts of Deloitte or, of PwC or Accenture and work my way up there. That's one path. I'm going to go into a technology company and do professional services and consulting, which Preet is doing, is another path. And then the path I took, which is I'm going to just do whatever I'm going to do and then go and then figure out how to be a consultant later, has its own challenges, but it is a different path. Would I trade? I don't know. You know what I mean? Like I think I would have tried to go earlier a little bit, because it is, it's not for the faint of heart to go out there and be, working on these projects while trying to sell and get your next project. It is not, you're working many hours, whether you're 25 or, you're 53, like you're working a lot. But it's very invigorating work. So yeah, I don't know if I applaud you, DWIB and DCA, for bringing this forward so early, because I think, I would encourage people who love this kind of complexity and really have a client services, or, start early. Don't wait till, you're old like me, but it doesn't mean you can't pivot into it when when you're later in your career.
Yeah, and I think just to kind of even hop on to what you were just saying, I think there's no right or wrong answer, and I want to highlight that because my opinion is going to be different from everybody's, but I do not regret starting right out of university. In my particular case, if I wanted to get in, I had to get in then, because they don't hire analysts unless you're straight out of school. It's unfortunate. I don't agree with it personally, because I think that if you go and travel for 2 years, that doesn't make you less of a candidate than coming out of school. But it is the way that it works, unfortunately. And for that reason, I came out of school very prepared and kind of tunnel vision on doing this path. I just, from personal factors, like I looked at, I don't have children, I don't have a spouse. Like if there's a time to work for over 12 hours in days sometimes, it would be now for me. And so for that reason, I was pretty dead set on this being an area of passion. And somebody also told me during the recruiting process that back when I was a student, they said that even a couple of years of experience in consulting can translate into 1.5 times that experience in industry. So for me, that was also really interesting, because if I want to jump ship and go into industry, I have that option. And I think that it keeps you really open to a lot of areas. And when I didn't know what I wanted to do, this was perfect. Like I can see a lot of different industries. I could go work in resources and energy if I wanted to tomorrow. I could work in healthcare. Like consulting keeps you very open to that. And even looking at somebody like Preet or Margaret, they have probably a crazy variety of clients. Like Margaret even gave us examples. So you can see that there's a lot of different things that you get exposed to. And for that reason, I wouldn't have changed when I got into consulting at all. I would say that my advice as well going back would just be, don't stress deciding exactly where you're going to end up. It's very stressful in university, and I wish that more people would say that, but you don't have to have the perfect plan, and nothing really goes to plan anyway at work. So I think you'll have your eyes set on something and it'll change tomorrow. So that would kind of be my advice looking back, if I could give myself the advice too. That would be my answer.
Can I build on just on what Ali said? So I have a 17-year-old daughter who actually about 2 weeks ago got into Mac business. So I'm excited about that, but also is awaiting other offers. So we'll see what happens. But, you know, we have this conversation about what do you want to do? What do you want to do? And should I know what I want to do? And, you know, and she's starting her university career, much less, you know, coming out of it. And this question is always, whenever I address students, you know, it's like, you know, am I crazy that I don't know what I want to do? Or, you know, or should I be more definitive, or, you know, and stressing about it? I fully echo Ali's comment. And Preet, you like, just breathe. You know what I mean? You guys have your lifetime ahead of you. And, you know, if we had 10 hours, and, you know, I could tell you all the different stages of the world I went through, and none were planned, you know, none were planned. I mean, you just have, you know, kind of your eye on the ball, like I said. So, you know, half the fun of all this is being open to new opportunities. And if you're so, you know, there are people, and God bless them, you know I want to be a doctor, or I know I want to be, you know, I want to save the world and be a geneticist or whatever. And I applaud those people, but that they're less the norm, right? And so, you know, being able to have an aperture, like a wide aperture about what the world can give you, is beneficial. And look at what's happened in the last year. Nobody could have predicted this, and it's created opportunity all over the place. So, you know, it's just a perfect metaphor for, you never know. And so don't be so fixated on, oh my God, do I do this or that? Be very open to the opportunities. And the number one piece of advice I would give you, irrespective of this being consulting or whatever, our panel, is just know what you love. Like if there's something you love to do, or a skill you have that drives you, think about that, coupled with, you know, a connection to some element of, you know, how is there a need in the market for that, and where does that sit? So if you love to solve problems, consulting is amazing for that. You know, if you love lots of diversity, it's a great opportunity. But, you know, look at what you love and use that as your guide.
Thank you. This conversation definitely segues really well into our next question. And I know personally that makes me feel good knowing that it's okay not to have everything completely planned out, but everything will definitely work out. And it's great to see from all your different backgrounds that kind of relates. Our next question for the three of you is, what has helped you get to where you are today? And what advice would you give to individuals that are considering the career path or just going into industry? What advice you would have for them?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest pieces of advice, and I think we've all been kind of echoing this throughout, is just openness to learn, right? And so, like I said, I'll go back to the example of I had no idea what consulting was, what software was. And so even during my interview with Profix, you know, they were asking me, it's an accounting-based software. So they're asking me some accounting-based questions, or have you worked with other softwares in the past? And like, I felt like an idiot, right? It's because I was like, no, I haven't. Like, I've learned Excel bare minimum in undergrad, and that's about it, right? And so at one point in my interview, I kind of just stopped and I said, like, hey guys, I really don't have a lot of experience in software, but I'm extremely eager to learn, right? I really want to know about this. You know, I promise you guys, like, I'll work super hard, right? And I ended up getting the job, right? And so what a lot of employers, like straight out of school as well, what they know you don't have a lot of experience, right? It's great. A lot of us try to work some part-time jobs, do some co-ops, all that is wonderful, but we don't have real world professional corporate experience or anything, right? So don't let that, you know, bring your confidence down at all. You know, just be open to kind of, as Margaret mentioned, knowing what skill you want, or maybe some things you want to try out, and just go for it, right? The other thing I would probably say is real life work experience. You know, as unfortunate as it is, I think when it comes time to, you know, recruiters, you know, comparing you against somebody who maybe has no experience, I think it does add value. It also helps you learn, right? And so I would say whatever experiences you guys can get to just get a little bit of real world experience, you know, throughout undergrad is super, super beneficial. It doesn't have to, like, for example, during my undergrad, I worked at McDonald's, right? McDonald's, and then from there, I worked at TD for a little bit, right? So whatever you can get, you know, it's displaying that, you know, one, you have the ability to multitask, still, you know, focus on your studies while being able to attain a job part-time. So it just shows a little bit, you know, more about your character, right? So I would say if you can, right, whether it's a co-op opportunity or a part-time job, I think, you know, that definitely kind of helps. Networking events is the other one I would probably say, right? This is amazing. I don't know if this was a thing during my undergrad. I definitely didn't participate in any sort of consulting networking events, but huge, right? Because you get to learn more about different types of roles and just, you know, speak and get your name out there. And then the other thing, I think probably the last thing maybe I'll end off with is, you know, you really got to own what you want, right? You know, nobody else, and the example I'm speaking to is, you know, I started off in consulting, but kind of my end goal was getting to a managerial level, right? So I wanted within, you know, next 5-6 years, I want to get to the point where my manager's that sort of thing. And so, you know, nobody cares as much about your career growth and, you know, what you're going to do as much as you do, right? So your managers, your mentors, your parents, you know, they're all there, super high supporters of you, right? But you're the one that has to do the work, right? So just constantly keep challenging yourself, right? When you're in a specific position, let's say an entry-level consultant position, always think ahead, right? Especially during, you know, these early years, I would say, what is the next position you want to get to? What is the next, you know, skill that you want to learn about, right? Go seek opportunities out for that. Talk to your managers, talk to your leaders, right? Because at the end of the day, you're going to be the one that's, you know, really just driving where your career ends up, sort of thing. So I think in a nutshell, that would be just my piece of advice there.
Do you want to go, Allie, and then I'll go after?
Sure, sounds good. I think the thing that I'd like to kind of zone in on that helped me get where I am, but also is very, very, very helpful in my career to date is like asking questions, I think. And that's a transferable skill from something as simple and on paper as in an interview. Never leave the interview saying, I don't have any questions. Like, ask a question, ask about the culture, ask anything, but ask a question. And I think that that has taken me my undergrad, whether it was with profs or asking to get involved in school. I think that that was pretty much my differentiator. I wasn't the most academically inclined student. That was just never my strong suit throughout university. But I'd say that I raised my hand. I asked questions. I volunteered for a lot of different things. And that taught the skills I needed for consulting. And like Preet said earlier, you don't have the consulting experience when you're coming out of school. There's just no way to have it. And I was so confused entering my interview because I told my interviewer, I said, I don't understand what you guys use as your differentiating factors, because me versus the guy next to me, we're both students. I've never been in a room with a client saying, here's what I can do for you. So I asked those questions, and I think it was helpful in showing that I don't think I know everything, but I'm willing to learn and I want to learn. And I've taken that through every single project experience I've had. And I had some pretty low points on projects where you just feel like you don't know what you're doing, and it transfers into your daily work. And I think that my manager took me aside and said, like, you're in your head too much. Just raise your hand for things, speak up. I'm a huge extrovert in real life, and I was acting very quiet in my job life because I didn't know things. And she just encouraged me. She said, ask more questions when you don't know things, and that confidence will come through again. So I would advise that wherever you're at, whether you're in first year or fourth year or fifth year, whatever year you're in, I would say ask those questions, reach out to people. If it's a recruiter and you think that you're being bothersome, send that follow-up. Like, it's not going to hurt. And I would say that if you want it, just go after it is kind of my advice, and it'll carry on into your career as well. It doesn't just stop once you get the job or graduate.
So excellent. Oh my goodness. So first of all, I'll comment on Preet. You nailed it, Preet. Like, everything you said was outstanding. And Ali, I really, I like what you said about putting your hand up and also asking questions. You know, here's what I'll say to the gang here. The one thing about consulting when you start your career is exactly as Ali described it. Like, when you're 30 years in business, you've got a lot of slings and arrows, and you've seen a lot, and you have a lot of perspective on what to do, what not to do. And by virtue of that, you come with a wisdom that you just don't have when you come out of school. But when you come out of school, the one thing you have an opportunity to do, particularly if you go into, like, as Preet's gone in, or you go into Accenture, you're afforded the opportunity to learn about frameworks. You're afforded to learn about, like, what is the process of consulting, and what are the ways in which you can support a client solve their problems. And the biggest learnings you get are the ones where you fail, because from those you get the best practices of what you're going to do the next time. And you build your library and your database. So Preet's going to say, I did this for this client, and these are the things that worked, and these are the things that didn't work. Build off that. I did this for this client, and these are the things that worked, and these are the things that didn't work, and so on. So you start with, you're going to learn the fundamentals of how to bake a cake. I know I need I need these ingredients. I'm going to need these pans. I need this heat. And then only when you bake the cake do you learn, oh my God, I shouldn't use gluten-free flour. I should, and then the next time you bake a cake, it gets better and better. And then you're going to try a pie, and then you're going to do muffins. And so that's the world. And so when you get to my age, I never had the benefit of, the recipes. I just show up and go, I know how to bake a cake, a muffin, and a pie. So I can come back and apply it. Anybody who knows me knows I have very crazy metaphors, but that's how I tell stories. Here's what I will tell you. The one thing I didn't hear, but I kind of heard, is my advice to you all is at some point in your life, whether it's early stages, mid or late, take a risk, take some risks. Because the greatest, risk and opportunity travel in pairs. They sit beside each other in a car. And, whether or not you gain from that risk or you lose from that risk, you learn from that risk. And that is the fundamental element of growth. And with that growth and with those learnings, you start to establish that base of knowledge that, oh, by the way, as you get older, people pay for, right? Particularly in consulting, but more importantly, whether you're in corporate, whether you're in small business, I put my hand up and this occurred and this just went sideways and oh my God, well, you know what, you pick your boots up and you get back and you get going and you learn from that and you move on. Or, oh my God, the biggest windfall ever. And I've got to repeat this, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. So that would be the only other piece of this that I would say is try to get a little bit out of your comfort zone. Learning does happen when you're not doing something that you're super familiar with. And it's okay to be vulnerable, and it's okay to go, like I applaud you, Ali, for saying, hey, I was in this place that, I had to talk to my manager and they needed to tell me to get out of my head. You know what? That's very that's very authentic and it's very true. And it's okay. Consulting and any career is going to put you in the grinder. And there are moments where you're just like, there is no way I can continue. I just want to go home I just got to figure it out. So take the risk, put your hand up, be open to new opportunities, and just learn.
Wonderful. Speaking of taking risks and, making mistakes, we wanted to know of an example of a big mistake that you made in your career and that one that taught you a big lesson.
Over to you, Preet.
Over to you, Preet. So the biggest mistake that I think I've probably made in my career is letting the fear of the unknown catch up to me, probably. One of the biggest things, I think, just straight out of school in my first job in a consulting type of role that I ran into was just so many unknowns. And so I'll give you guys a couple examples, right? So I've mentioned before, I knew nothing about consulting, nothing about software. And so after about a month of training, right, my expectation was to kind of get on meetings with clients, actually travel to client site at that time, meet with a group of, 5-6 people who are these higher level executives of companies. Mercedes, for example, was one of our clients, right? So I'm traveling to their office. They obviously know what they're doing. They've been doing this stuff for years. And here I am, this like student during my internship that's supposed to tell them like how to do things, right? And so a lot of unknown with that, right? I had no idea how the software worked properly. I had no idea how to communicate professionally with these higher level executives. And so in a consulting type of role, especially in like the technology aspect that I'm in, right? That there's so much to learn. Like I mentioned before, the software is constantly evolving, so you have to constantly be learning, right? And so I lost a lot of sleep over that because, I was the type of person in university, and I'm sure many of you are too, is, before you kind of go to write an exam, the material that's going to be on it. You're studying it, you know what's coming at you, right? And so in consulting, it's not like that, right? Every client that you speak to will have different requirements. So there's lots and lots of unknowns on the daily that you're going to be running into. And so I spent a lot of time, I remember coming home in evenings, trying to just catch up to get to a point where I could, run away from the unknowns. but you can't, I think, in consulting, right? Because there's always going to be random questions, random things that are thrown at you. And so a lot of it is really just going and figuring out the answer and getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, I would say, right? And so had I known that earlier, I would have just, known that with time, right, I'll eventually just get comfortable not knowing the answers to everything right away, sort of thing. But that's probably the biggest mistake that I made, was just caused a lot of undue stress and sleepless nights, just trying to catch up to, where I could get to a point where I knew what I was going into my next day of work, right? But there was always surprises popping up. So that'd probably be it for me.
And I have quite a list, I would say, of mistakes I've made so far, but that one is also on my list. So thank you. But in all seriousness, I feel like making the mistakes is what makes you so much better, because I feel like there's no true end point. There's just these little milestones. And I feel like on my 14-month project, even to give an example, I felt like it was just an up and down and up and down. And then all of a sudden you realize that your day-to-day it's not as stressful. It's pretty like easy almost. And that's when you kind of realize you've plateaued and you've reached the point of mastering what you came to do. And then it's on to the next. So I really like that. That's just a little side note there. But I would say the biggest mistake that I've made so far would be knowing, I don't want to say no right, but being really close to the data as an analyst. You're in a lot of meetings with people who are a lot higher than you, a lot more experienced. And there have been several times where I had an inkling that whoever was speaking, whether it was client or whether it was on my team, may have been saying something that was not necessarily the solution to the problem or the accurate data, for example. And I didn't raise my hand to say, hey, I don't actually think that's true. Instead, I think it's this. And so there were several times where, again, I was given the feedback of, well, why didn't you say something? Why didn't you raise your hand? And I went in, I realized after, in hindsight's 2020, I think, I realized after that I had this idea in my head that it was almost like a disrespectful thing for me as somebody new and somebody junior to go in and sort of argue against somebody who's not just older than me, but more experienced. And I had to let go of that thought, because it's not true. They're pulling you in because you have some type of value to add to the team. And if I'm not sticking my hand up and saying, hey, Margaret, I think you're wrong here, I think it might actually be this, you're actually helping whoever it is in the room. And I think that was a huge mistake on my part, was realizing this. It took me a while to be comfortable enough to say and be vocal when I thought that an answer might be different from what somebody else has said. And I think that's when the best ideas come, because it can be like a ping pong match of ideas where that's where you generate better ones, or it can prevent wasting a lot of time down a rabbit hole of something that may not have been right. So that would be probably my biggest mistake I've made. And it's taught me to be a lot more vocal in any conversation, despite who's on the other side of the table. So off to you, Margaret.
You know what? I'm gonna build on what you said, Ali, because I wrote two things down. I'm scribbling, just so you know. When I'm writing, people used to scan my notes when I'd be in a meeting because they had no idea where my brain was going. But I wrote down two things: didn't speak up, and then bad news. And then this notion of power. So when you're a junior in a consulting project, there can be the self-governing factor that you say, I don't have the experience to speak up. And the second piece is there's a power play, which is they're paying me money. And they, at what point do I challenge them? Oftentimes because as a oftentimes we have a natural inclination to want to please. And so in wanting to please, we don't want to give bad news. And when we don't want to give bad news, we don't want to say somebody's wrong. Or there is a threat in some respect, which is, I don't want to challenge my partner who's saying yes to this. So there's a very interesting, this is like a life lesson more so than even consulting, which is, at what point do you stand up and say, under these circumstances, and I think a large part of this is how you communicate the challenge and or statement that you're making, whether you say, I don't agree, or whether you say, a softer way to say is, with all due respect, you believe this. If I look at the data, it provides me with the context to actually suggest an alternative. There is a way to say it where it doesn't come as offensively. But as you, I think as you progress in consulting, depending on the client, and I can tell you, as recent as 6 months ago, I would state an opinion based on fact, and it was not respected and desired by the client. And I don't care, he didn't care what I had to say. He was right and I was wrong. So, it is a persistent, I think, condition in consulting where you're battling this concept of, where do I speak up? Do I speak up? And, I'm going to divert a little bit from Ali. What I put down as my biggest mistake was, not biggest mistake, like it's been a consistent battle in my early days, was giving bad news. So I would oversell and I'm probably looking at Preet. It's, when you're in a technology consulting capacity, and, imagine now you're on the, as a, you can be in the state of, okay, we're going to deploy this amazing profit, platform, and it's going to increase your profit by 30%, because if you put it in and you had no visibility for this information, and now you have visibility, and oh, by the way, you can make better decisions. And if you make better decisions, you're going to be able to do X, Y, Z. And oh, by the way, this is, because you're selling in order to, you're selling a benefit in order to get your consulting services and your platform adopted and or funded by this client. The challenge in doing that is then all of a sudden you start to deploy this thing, and we didn't know it had to integrate into this, and we didn't know, that these challenges, and all of a sudden the benefits start to degrade. And giving a client bad news is a very difficult thing when you've oversold the benefit. So one of the things, and maybe this is a nuance that if you haven't done consulting, just put this in the back of your book and you'll remember it, is it's very important to be practical about the benefits and or, the recommendations you're providing and the benefits that you're espousing. There has to be some dimension of practicality, because you will get caught in this world of, you oversold something, and it will be challenging to deal with the client. So that was something I learned a lot earlier. But this speaking up, I just want to say there's one example, and it was early in my career where, and it hasn't more about when you're in early stage in a company and or a working with a customer or client. I just want to say this out loud so you remember it. One day you might remember it, and you'll text me or send me a LinkedIn and say, I remember when you said that, and I'll do this. I was a junior in, a corporation, and a little bit to Ali, somebody called at 11 o'clock at night, and they needed something. And so anyways, in this context, it was a manager of mine. And I was so eager to ascend, and I was so ambitious. And so I latched on, I put my hand up for everything. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I want to progress. I'm going to take on every challenge, which I encourage people. If you want to move forward, you do that. But this particular, I think he got used to my putting up my hand. So he started to take advantage of me a little bit. And so, you know, here in came this request. And, you know, it's like, you know, you know, in came this desire, I need to know about X. Well, didn't I, you know, this was at 5 o'clock, didn't I work until 4 o'clock in the morning to answer this freaking question? And by, you know, 5 o'clock I stayed up all night, did this thing and delivered it, you know, 4:55 in the morning. And I'll never forget the email that he sent to me, whatever it was back in the day, was like, why did you, like, I didn't need it this quickly. And it, like, I only wanted to just kind of think about it. Like after the fact, I went, if I only asked, by when do you need this? And what are you using this information for? I would have saved myself a night of sleeplessness. And I might have found out that it was a directional decision he was making, and he really only needed it next Tuesday. And I will never forget that lesson. So that was just, I'm just imparting that upon you, whether you're a consultant or anything else. Always ask, by when and what are you using this information for? That's my like little nuggets. So if you ever encounter this in the next 10 years of your life, send me a LinkedIn and remind me that you go, I remember when you said that, Margaret.
Noted. I will definitely reach out to you. So we did want to just bring up a question from the audience, a quick little lightning round, just so we have enough time for networking. But just really quick, if we could hear about, Krista asked about a most challenging project that you've experienced, or a project where you felt you grew the most as a consultant.
Go. I feel like I have a fresh experience for this, actually. So the project I just, I wouldn't say the day-to-day work that we were doing was necessarily challenging, but what I would say, and I'm not going to get tactical with you, but essentially the end of the project ask was to report on what we had done. And so as we're reporting, we realized that their data quality was just garbage. Like, there's no other polite way to put it. All the work we had done for 12 months prior wasn't getting stored accurately. And so that looks bad on us as a firm, saying, how did you not catch this earlier, despite the fact there are employees that are putting it into the system. Regardless, it looks bad on you because we've pulled you in to do this work and it's not getting done. So pretty much on a daily basis, I was on phone calls for so many hours of a day with this one contact at the office that my sister knew the name of this guy. She kept asking, she's laughing, who is so-and-so, and why are you always on the phone? And it was such a fine line between micromanaging this contact and also managing the relationship, to the point that we previously talked about, with wondering what that fine line is between, you never want, or personally, I never want to be disrespectful to somebody I'm working with, and you'll come across a lot of people who just have different work styles, but to me, that's something that I always want to stay true to, is like my character, and carrying that through into work. So managing a relationship with a client who's really not their work was very hard. And it's hard when you get frustrated and you come in with a lot of emotion because you're so invested, you spent a year of your life on this and you're messing for us. And so it was very challenging, and I had to get a lot of guidance from people that I worked with, just to say, hey, like, how else can I go about this? This didn't work with him. And I was managing a contact client site, and to me it brought in this whole new aspect of managing, which I haven't done before. Like, I'm the one who has a manager. And so it was an interesting experience. Definitely grew a lot. And I even got the feedback at the end of the project that said, like, that's where we saw you grow the most, because you went from just doing your job to then making sure other people are doing theirs. So it was a very cool experience, very tricky. But again, I think when you have those challenges, just be vocal, get help from people. it's not a one-man job ever. And so that would be my answer, I think.
Do you want to go, Preet?
Sure, yeah. I'll share a quick example of mine. So probably the one that comes to mind, I was just thinking about this a little bit, is the one where I would say I grew the most was a project that I got put on, again, just during my internship, right? Because I'm super young, don't know what's what. And so I brought this up briefly, but one of the clients essentially was Mercedes-Benz Financial Services. So I was excited, but already super nervous, right? Because again, I'm this little student that's supposed to, you know, on an internship, go there and tell them how they're supposed to automate, right? What they've been doing for years. And so I traveled to their office. And so the reason why this project was particularly different than other projects I had worked on was because, so usually you get assigned a project and you're on it from start to finish, right? So you're the consultant, you know what's been built, all of that. This project was basically something that another one of, you know, my colleagues had basically worked on, and then that person ended up leaving. So I kind of just jumped in at 75% completion, right, to help take them to the finish line. And so I got there, and you know, there's these financial analysts, like basically telling me all these things that they want built within the software, right? One, I know what they're asking for is well beyond kind of the scope of time that we have available. Two, I'm looking at what's been built already by my colleague who's no longer on this project. And based on my knowledge, what's been built so far was built very poorly, right? And so it wasn't following kind of best practices of, you know, how we're supposed to kind of implement the solution in our technology. And so I'm sitting there and they're throwing all these crazy requirements at me. I'm looking at what's been built and it's pretty much trash so far. And I know they've spent, you know, thousands and thousands of dollars, like 30,000, 40,000 potentially already on consulting services for this solution that I know isn't going to give them what they need, right? On top of that, I'm intimidated, right? So I'm standing there and I'm very bad at lying. Like I cannot at all like bullshit my way through things, right? And so I pretty much just, while they're talking, like I'm thinking, how do I handle this? And so I just, with my honesty, you know, I just basically said, guys, like, you know, it sounds like you guys really know what you want to build out in here. You know, I think it's worth having a conversation and reviewing what's been built kind of from the start to make sure that you guys are really happy with the end solution that you get. And I was just completely transparent with them. I didn't, you know, talk bad about my colleague and what's been built so far or anything like that, but basically just told, you know, I guess empathized with them and basically, you know, really just said like, we 100% want this to be successful, reiterated some of the points that they were saying they wanted the solution. And I said, you know, this may take more effort than the time we have available, but at the end of the day, you know, we'll make sure we'll get you guys a solution, you know, that gets there. So they took it kindly, which was not my expectation. I thought they were going to start screaming about kind of not enough money, this and that. And so after that, I would say that was just a huge confidence booster for me, like just being a student during my internship, right? And so what I learned from that and what I've continued is that, you know, I can continue to just be kind of honest, right, with clients. No, and Margaret was kind of alluding to that sometimes it's hard to kind of push back because they're paying you for something, and you know, to push back and say like, you know, you're going to need to spend maybe some more money, right, to get to the final end result that you need, or whatever the case may be. But just, you know, being honest with them and them being accepting of that, I think just really was a great learning experience for me and really just helped boost my confidence kind of going forward as well. So that would be my experience.
So I'm gonna round out a little bit of what the Preet and Ali talked about. Consulting is around delivering requirements on the basis of, like, there's three dimensions. You know, there's time, there's money, and there's scope. Like there's this concept of, I want to build a birdhouse. I have $100 and it needs to be done in 2 weeks. So this concept of, okay, they know they want a birdhouse, they have this much money, and this is the amount of time. And as a consultant, you look at those 3 prongs or elements of the stool, and you go, okay, yep, I can build a birdhouse, and that birdhouse, is for 3 birds, and it costs $100, and we're going to do it in 2 weeks. What happens in consulting is all of a sudden, one of those 3 dimensions changes. I really wanted a birdhouse for 75 birds, but I still only have $100 and it needs to be done in 2 weeks. Or I want the birdhouse for 3 birds, but my $100 became 50 and I still have 2 weeks. Or, the project still has those dimensions, but now the 2 weeks is 2 days. So those 3, you're constantly dealing with the 3 dimensions of scope, time, and money. And what I was going to say is, one of the biggest challenges is managing expectations and being able to say to a client, we are happy to build you a birdhouse for 75 birds, but it's going to cost $500 and it's going to take 4 weeks. And having that conversation about $500 in 4 weeks is a very difficult conversation. If you're wherever you are in that power, because you want to please the client and you think there's more work. So oftentimes, especially if you're working in a big partnership, like the world of Accenture, they're going to go, okay, well, we'll give them the 75. We're going to do it in 3 weeks. And we'll do good faith because we know that there's a bigger project down the way. So there's always this dimension. And the one thing that I learned in my, the biggest challenge I had, and I'll just do it in 2 minutes, but it was a world of pain, was, I ran strategy for the corporation. We had antiquated systems, kind of like what Ali said. Everything was done on spreadsheets and God knows what. It's amazing that a billion-dollar company was done that way. I ran IT strategy and business transformation and knew that in order for us to achieve the kind of cost efficiencies that we needed to put in a massive new digital platform. And it took us a year to go through 16 different presentations, all the way up from the Canadian corporation into the global corporation to get the approval on the basis of a business case to deploy this technology platform. And it was funded at, let's say, $50 million or $45 million. And I was the head of strategy. I was partnering with the CEO of the corporation. We got it up to or at the time it was Ursula Burns was the global president. We are sitting, I'll never forget it, December 15th, 2013, in a meeting at 5:59 p.m., whatever, in the evening. And the global CEO, after the global president said, the global CEO said, yes, you have it. And the global CIO said, so we were doing this for Canada. And the global CIO said, absolutely, you will get the funding, but it needs to be lift and shift to the rest of the world. And all of our hearts just sank. And we just said, yes, we will do that. And what we did that moment, because of a year of trying to get this funding, because we knew it was critical for the company, is we agreed to something that was a dramatically different scope than what we originally proposed. We have proposed a Canadian-only solution, not worrying about the rest of the globe. And that one statement that it will be lift and shift for the globe was the condition to give us the money, but we said yes. In that one breath, it changed the entire dynamics of the implementation. It went from a 2-year implementation to a 4-year implementation. It went from a $50 million project to a $75 million project. And what we should have done, we shouldn't have said yes in that one breath. or we should at least slept on it and come back the next day and said, whoa, Nellie, we need to rethink this. So I would say, you know, that is a dramatic example of when you're asked to increase your scope and you don't, and you just go, yes. And you need to really think about stuff like that. And that's, you know, one of the big lessons of consulting.
Awesome. So those were some really great and valuable answers that I'm sure many of us appreciated. We have a little bit, 50 minutes for our networking session, but before we move on to that, Laura and I would like to thank our wonderful panelists for their time today, as well as the attendees who attended this event. We really hope you enjoyed it. Now, in order for networking, I'm pretty sure you can go into reception and there will be breakout rooms that you can hop in and out of. So that can get started right now. Enjoy.